Well, good morning. I wanted to give you a quick tutorial on how I would like for you to annotate today's poem. And this will be kind of a quick refresher of some of the figurative language that's associated with poetry. So your vocabulary we reviewed in the first part of this assignment: alliteration, assonance, onomatopoeia, enjambment, similes, and metaphors. Of course, with poetry, you have repetition, rhyme. Rhyme has many varieties depending on whether you're in regular English or honors English. We'll break that down a little bit more. And if you need to spell any of these figurative language devices, just remember that the more you actually hand write out the word, the more likely it is to sink into long-term memory. And spelling is something we need to study even though it's our mother tongue, because we learn our mother tongue through our ears, and tackling the advanced reading and writing concepts, of course, are what we practice all the way through college and adulthood. So give yourself a little slack. That's part of what this course is for, just providing more opportunity to practice handwriting these terms and using these terms when you're analyzing poetry. Okay, the first thing I'd like you to do on your annotations when we're talking about poetry is always to number the lines. You'll see I've numbered all the way consecutively from 1 through 19 on the left-hand side of each of the lines. That's traditional. Some of the poems we use will already have line numbers, and that's fine. This one did not, so we added our own, and I would like you to do that on your own copy. Paper copies will be distributed in class and also posted on Canvas. If you need to, you're welcome to print your own if you miss class, or just pick up a spare copy from me. Okay, the second thing I'd like you to do, and this is the first 3 reads of a poem are just looking for different things. The first time we read it, we're just reading it to wrap our brains around it, just to see what happens. Plot, surface level stuff. The first reading is always concentrating on explicitly reading the words on the page. So I'm going to do that. And you don't need to make any marks as I'm reading. Just listen to the language, listen to how I read it. When you're reading poetry, notice you do not pause at the end of the line unless there's a punctuation mark. You read poetry just as you read sentences. In fact, you can think of a poem as a paragraph with a different shape and more kind of musical underpinnings. Okay, I Love the Look of Words by Maya Angelou. Popcorn leaps, popping from the floor of a hot black skillet and into my mouth. Black words leap, snapping from the white page, rushing into my eyes, sliding into my brain, which gobbles them the way my tongue and teeth chomp the buttered popcorn. When I have stopped reading, ideas from the words stay stuck in my mind, like the sweet smell of buttered perfuming my fingers long after the popcorn is finished. I love the book and the look of words, the weight of ideas that popped into my mind. I love the tracks of new thinking in my mind. I always I'll do a little think aloud just so I like to review my thoughts after I read a poem. I particularly like to notice where my reading was challenged by the structure of the poem. I feel like some of the sound processes that happened in this paragraph led me to sort of tangle some of my words, and we'll talk about why that might have happened and why the author might have set it up that way. So, but I am going to write down what I noticed. So this, and just to remind you, vowels are A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y, and consonants are everything else in the alphabet. Generally, they are hard sounds, but it depends. They can be silent as well. Okay, the other place I'd like to point out, I noticed presented just a rhythm problem when I was reading. My brain had a hard time sorting out where I was supposed to pause in this last paragraph. So my brain wanted to pause at the end of a complete idea. But then, for instance, I love the tracks of new thinking in my mind. That thought clearly continues on to the second line. Whereas I love the book and the look of words feels like it should have a comma after it. So there are some, and it feels like there should be a period after my mind. So it feels like the author left out some punctuation. Second time you read it, you want to look for figurative language that you recognize. Onomatopoeia happens all the way throughout this poem when words are spelled like the sounds they make, so you want to be able to annotate your poem for those instances. Enjambment is when the sentence continues on, even past the end of the line. So if you look at the first 3 lines of the poem, that's all one sentence, and we call that enjambment. Thought continues all the way through to the period. The other thing I notice right off the bat is an awful lot of alliteration. Alliteration, if you recall, is the repetition of consonant sounds beginning of a word, and I am color coding this. So within the poem, every time there's a consonant sound that is repeated, I want to annotate that with, in my case, pink. After we pull apart all the figurative language, we're going to make some comments on the poem itself as to why the poet is making the similes, the metaphors, and the sound, using the sound repetition devices that she's using. We're going to write all of that on our copy of the poem. That's going to make our analytical work when we do the TP cast so much easier. Everything in alliteration is in pink. Now, I may have missed something, so please keep your eyes out for additional instances of that. Assonants are vowel sounds that repeat, and I have highlighted all of those in this kind of yellowish green color. So I'm going to do this. So vowel sounds also repeat. Here's a really good example. Rushing into my eyes, sliding into my brain. So eyes and slide, that's a repetition of the I, the hard I sound. So I'm going to make a notation of that in green, which shows it is assonance. And there's an awful lot of that throughout the poem. Now, there are some comparisons that we want to sort out. There are similes and metaphors. What I would like you to do is, with the definition of simile is a comparison using like or as. Metaphors are comparisons without the use of like or as. In other words, metaphors are usually implicit, implied, and similes are usually explicit or stated directly. So I'm going to say that here, just to give you practice using some of our content area vocabulary. So there are 2 comparisons down here. One uses like or as, one does not. You can just draw an arrow indicating whether the simile is the orange text evidence or the blue text evidence. And the last thing I'd like you to do is go through the poem and annotate for what is happening. Lines 1 through 3. Popcorn leaps, popping from the floor of a hot black skillet and into my mouth. The best place to start with this is make an indication in the margin whether the section is figurative or literal. Figurative is, of course, non-literal language. Things like similes, metaphors, all the sound devices, hyperbole, understatement, all of that is figurative language. This is where you're looking for what's underneath the surface of the iceberg. L is for literal language. This strategy alone will really help you break down a poem and understand what's really happening and what's happening in the writer's imagination, or what the writer is trying to make happen for you in your imagination. All right, so I'm going to ask you a series of questions as I read each chunk, and you write in the margin whether it's figurative or literal. Popcorn leaps, popping from the floor of a hot black skillet and into my mouth. All right, is that figurative language or is it literal language? Is it really happening? We'll do a couple together. That is literal. That's really happening. Black words leap, snapping from the white page. Ask yourself, she's reading a book. Are the words really rising off the page? That is figurative. That is a metaphor. So you're going to want to annotate that. The words are not literally leaping or snapping from the white page. She is drawing a comparison of what happens when she reads to what happens when she's eating popcorn. All right, rushing into my eyes, we're still talking about the black words, sliding into my brain, which gobbles them the way my tongue and teeth chomp the buttered popcorn. Ask yourself for that chunk, is that figurative or literal? And I think that I will let you do that individually. Continuing on, when I have stopped reading, ideas from the words stay stuck in my mind like the sweet smell of buttered popcorn perfuming my finger long after the popcorn has vanished. In that thought, I feel like you can split it in half. Half of it is figurative, half of it is literal, and I would like you to mark which is which. And finally, I love the book and the look of words, the weight of ideas that popped into my mind. I love the tracks of new thinking in my mind. So same thing here in this little conclusion piece. If you could divide what is figurative, what she wants us to see in our minds, from what is literal, from the literal experience of popping popcorn, that will help you understand the overarching metaphor of the poem, the overall comparison of the popcorn to the act of reading, and that will really help you complete your TP cast form. We will do this in class if you are with me on B day. If you're an A day and you're unfamiliar with TP cast and poem annotation, I hope that this helped, and I will see you guys when I see you. Thank you. Bye.